Welcome to the Alpha Koncepts podcast in 2021. Last year in 2020, we brought you 20 great podcasts and we received great feedback from all of you. I want to thank you very much to everybody who took the time to give us their feedback and give us their opinion. And overwhelmingly, what you guys wanted was video. So moving forward in 2021, we're going to try to include video like this whenever possible for our podcast. Now, don't worry, we are going to have the podcast available in audio format only on our SoundCloud and our Spotify and our other podcast hosting platforms. But whenever possible, we're going to try to have the video for you guys as well. Having said that, I kind of made a mistake, and this is our first video podcast, and there's some bugs we need to work out. In this podcast, I want to apologize. There's just a little bit of an audio muffle on my microphone, so that was my mistake. And we thought about, what do we want to do with this? Do we want to re-record the podcast? Do we want to toss the podcast out completely? Ultimately, we decided to let it ride. We didn't want to re-record the podcast because we didn't want it to seem scripted or not spontaneous. That's not what we're about. Also, we didn't want to trash the podcast because there's some great content here. Our guest, Mark, his audio is perfectly crisp and clear. My audio is slightly muffled. So it's not the end of the world. Thank you, everybody, for your support. We're looking to a very successful 2021 and beyond. Enjoy. Welcome, everybody, to the Alpha Koncepts podcast, where we're going to talk about everything going on in the gun culture, from training to gear and gun rights advocacy. Hi, my name is Thomas Kroll, and I'll be your host on this adventure. And today I have with me Mark Oliva from the National Shooting Sports Foundation. Mark, did I say your name correctly?
Close enough. As long as you don't call me late for dinner, I'll answer to it. So.
I'm always afraid that I am going to butcher my guests' names, and you think by now I would ask you to pronounce it before we get the ball rolling, but it always escapes me.
No worries. I pronounce it Oliva, but Oliva is really close. In fact, a lot of my family still uses the pronunciation of Oliva, so you're good.
Perfect. Excellent. So before we jump into things, I just want to remind everybody that this podcast is sponsored by Alpha Koncepts Firearm Training. We've got our training calendar for 2021 released for concealed carry defensive pistol, and this year we're actually adding we've partnered with the United States Concealed Carry Association. We're going to be hosting webinars with short 2-hour, 1-hour, 2-hour classes. Those are free for everybody to join. You can find those on the training calendar at alphaconcepts.com. So definitely sign up for those and check them out. They're free. We're going to talk about gun safety, how to stop mass shootings, that sort of thing. And I think it's real good information for everybody to know. But enough about that, Mark. Tell me, what is the National Shooting Sports Foundation?
So the National Shooting Sports Foundation is the Firearm Industry Trade Association. We represent your manufacturers, both on the firearm and ammunition side. We represent your wholesalers, or your retailers, your distributors, ranges, and some endemic media who are, you gun writers and outdoor writers are members of ours as well. We're roughly a little over 9,000 members, and we range everything from your big box retailers to your small mom and pops. And those are primarily the bulk of who we represent. We're trying to make sure that all those folks are able to do business and able to continue to work and be able to sell firearms to law-abiding citizens throughout the country.
And it's, doing business is incredibly difficult for someone who is working in the firearm industry. Obviously, there's a lot of rules and restrictions and hoops that they have to jump through. And if they make a mistake, or they have an employee make a mistake, they can lose their federal license and go out of business overnight.
It's important. I mean, those are the kind of things that we try to offer our members is those consultation services with some of our our consultants who are able to help people walk through some of those steps to know what the loopholes are out there that they can get caught in if they're not careful, and make sure that they're ready for an inspection, to make sure that they're staying within compliance of the law and they're staying in compliance with all the regulations. There's a lot that covers down. We're one of the most heavily regulated industries out there. So there's a lot that, individual business owners need to understand, not just your manufacturers who are making the firearms, but especially, the small mom and pops who may be running, maybe 2-3 people running the whole entire store, but they're going to be inspected just like any other retailer is going to be inspected. And they need to be ready for that.
Absolutely. And I mentioned webinars in the intro. but you guys also have a series of webinars that are geared towards training retailers, and they don't have to necessarily attend the live event. You've got that training on your website as well, correct?
Yeah, we've been really active on our Shot University webinar series, especially this year when unfortunately we had to cancel Shot Show.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah, unfortunately we had to cancel Shot Show, so a lot of those things that are available the day before SHOT Show opens up to your retailers, to your manufacturers, to your compliance, administrators, all those things that we try to offer during that time. We want to make sure that those things are still available to you. So we've been able to kind of push some of that out through SHOT University this year and make sure that's available to you throughout the year.
So is that SHOT University available to the general public or members only?
I believe it's open to the members. I'd have to double check to you on that. So it's
Okay.
under our membership services. So certainly anybody who has questions can reach out to our member services team. And they'll be able to help you out.
Sure. Now, you said that the National Shooting Sports Foundation is, it's a trade association. Every industry has trade associations. Would you also categorize NSSF as a gun rights advocacy group in any way?
It's interesting you bring that up. And I think we need to make sure we have a clear distinction. That we are a trade association. Simple, plain fact that's what we are. We could not exist without the Second Amendment. So therefore, the Second Amendment is absolutely central to our industry. It's essential to the business that we're in. We're a constitutionally protected industry. And so we work hard to make sure that your Second Amendment rights are protected. But we want to make sure that we're clear. We're not in the same lane as some of the other Second Amendment advocacy groups like the NRA or Gun Owners of America or Second Amendment Foundation or many of the others that are out there. We kind of run a little bit on parallel tracks. And I think really for best people to understand what we do in concert with some of these other groups is really the gun counter is kind of the dividing line. We try to do everything to make sure that that gun can get to the counter so you can buy that gun. And that's everything from making sure that our manufacturers are able to get the bar stock to make the barrels, that they're able to make sure that they can conduct business in their state to be able to get the manpower, the whole 9 yards, distribution, warehousing, everything that comes with getting that gun to the counter. Once it crosses that counter, that's really where a lot of these Second Amendment organizations take up, and they're advocating for your individual right, for your freedom to exercise their right. Again, we have some equities over there, but really we're advocating on behalf of the manufacturers on the business side, and the other groups are advocating for your individual right.
That brings up an excellent point. You said you want to make sure that even the manufacturers have the raw materials to do what they need to do, because if they can't make the gun, we can't be out there training and practicing and shooting and using the firearms for our personal protection. So I don't know if you want to give me your personal opinion or maybe NSSF official opinion on what's going on with ammunition right now.
It's the $1 million question, isn't it? It is really come down to a matter of understanding what happened last year with firearm sales. We had 21 million background checks for the sale of a firearm last year, by far a record that we've had from any previous year. To kind of put it in perspective, the best year we had previous to 2020 was 2016, and we had 15.7 million background checks then. In 2019, we had 13.2 million. So we had, over 7 million jump from one year to the next. Now, if we had talked at SHOT Show in 2019, and I told you we're going to have 8.5 million new gun buyers this year, you'd have looked at me like I had a third eyeball.
Right.
Accurate in that prediction, we'd be having this conversation from my yacht down in the Caribbean, because that's what we saw this year. 8.4 million people, over 8.4 million, bought a gun for the very first time. 21 million background checks. What we also learned this year is that of those 8.4 million people who bought a gun, they did it for primarily concerns over their safety. That was the driving factor this year. We saw that with the pandemic. We saw that with the riots that happened over the summer. And then, of course, as we got into the election year, people became concerned that they weren't going to be able to exercise their rights the way they wanted to. They're going to buy a gun while they could. So we saw all that play into 2020. We also saw that 40% of the people who bought a gun last year were women. And that's a significant increase. The largest demographic increase we had of any group was among African Americans.
Sure.
A 58% increase from 2019 to 2020 among African American.
Yeah, one of my first podcasts was about that very exact subject. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think when we understand the issue of ammunition and the difficulty to find it right now, I think first we need to understand when you inject 8.5 million people into the market, they're not just buying guns. An article about this about a week or so ago. And they said, listen, if everyone just bought a box of 50, you're looking at 400 million rounds.
Sure.
I mean, that's an incredible dent into the production. And, it's easy to sit here on the sidelines and say, well, why isn't Federal making more ammunition? Why is, Remington's obviously coming back online. Why aren't they making more ammunition? Why isn't Hornady making more ammunition? They're making more ammunition in 2020 than they ever have before.
I mean, there's only so much that they can do. And then the next question becomes, well, why don't they build a new factory? And people, I think, have the opinion that you can snap your fingers and put together a factory overnight. But you're talking about, permitting processes. You're talking about loans. You're talking about board of directors. You're talking about the actual construction, which has been slowed down because of COVID. You're talking about equipment setup, purchasing. I mean, you're talking about probably, I would just speculate, a year or two minimum from the time the decision is made until the first round is going out the door before, setting up a new manufacturing facility. So I don't think that a lot of people think you can just, well, put the speed, just turn it up to 10 on the machines and we'll all get more ammo. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and I'll give a lot of credit to the ammo makers. Federal has put out a couple of videos. Jason Vanderbrink has walked to the factory to make sure people can see, yes, the machines are turning as quickly as possible. And he said, listen, they made more hunting ammunition in 2020 than they ever had before. Jason Hornady did the same thing. They put out several videos throughout this, what seems to be a shortage of ammunition, but they've actually produced 30% more ammunition in 2020 than they had in the year previous. So they're actually making more ammunition than they ever have before. So when people ask me, well, where's all the ammo? Obviously, it's not on the shelves around my stores either. It's not like I'm getting a special cut, but there's no conspiracy theory that the government's buying it up and putting it in their warehouse so you can't get it. I've seen some of the other conspiracy theorists from some of the other podcasters out there who even said that, some of these ammunition manufacturers are colluding together to kind of hold back inventory so they can drive the prices up. And that's absolutely false. And that would actually be antitrust illegal activity. It would be illegal. But two, and I'll get back to that in a minute, but part of it really is everyone's buying ammunition, not just all these new people. So I'm telling people, if you're not the one buying ammunition today, it's your neighbor who's doing it. And it kind of becomes a little bit of the toilet paper effect. You walk into the store and you see the shelves are starting to get bare and you're like, oh man, maybe I should grab a couple boxes of 9mm before I can't get it anymore. And so you grab a couple of boxes. Well, that has a cascading effect and people want to start getting it while they still can. Obviously, we've seen the price rise along with this. I mean, I try to use the 5.56 round as an example just because it's easy numbers and I'm a communications major, but 33 cents a round before all this started. And now you're looking at close to $1 round. So that's 3 times the cost of what it was.
Yeah, I'm a 9mm guy, and I track very, very closely. And yet, you're absolutely right. You're looking at the 300 to 400% increase on 9mm. I mean, I was this time last year, 2019, before the lockdown, I was paying online, buying cases for 17 cents a round, and now I can get them for 68 cents a round. So it's definitely a significant increase, 300-400%. And I think all that ammo is either in the berms and the backsplashes, or it's in people's basements, like you said. The toilet paper effect. People are just kind of hoarding it.
Yep, and I think I think from a business perspective too, people take a step back and look at this. It's kind of like you said. It's not exactly that these manufacturers have an extra facility in the backyard that they can go cut the shrink wrap off and turn the lights on and they're ready to go. I mean, it takes a significant investment to get into that and to be able to make that happen. But they're also looking at when you have 8.5 million people into the market. Listen, we know as shooters, as recreational shooters, we tend to get kind of stuck on the ammunition that we know our guns like. There's only a certain amount of it. There's only one brand of ammunition that I'm going to shoot through my 6.5 Creedmoor. There's only one brand of ammunition I'm going to shoot through my 30-06 bolt rifle. And while I'll put just about any kind of ammunition into my 9mm or into my 5.56, I know that these are only ones I'm ever going to use in these other rifles because I know exactly how they perform each and every time. So we tend to become a little brand loyal. So if we look at this from a business perspective, and you have 8.5 million people who are now buying ammunition, and they don't know the difference between brand A and brand B, if they're going to be able to start shooting brand A and they know it works for them, they're probably going to stick with brand A. And that's what I try to remind people. Ammunition manufacturers aren't holding back because right now, if anything, they're able to capture a little bit of new market loyalty because we know how we kind of are with our own, choosing of ammunition. that everything's good, we're probably going to stick with the brands we really like and we know perform well for us. And that's going to be the same for these new gun owners as well.
Yeah, of those 8 million new gun owners, those that actually stick with it, which I certainly hope a significant number, have not just become gun owners, but decide to join the gun culture. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Brand loyalty is a thing. When it comes to training ammunition, I buy whatever is the absolute cheapest. When it comes to my personal protection ammunition or my precision rifle ammunition, you're 100% correct. I kind of found what I like, what works within my criteria. And it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm going to stick with it until I'm given a reason not to. Why reinvent the wheel? I've already done the testing and the research and it works. So you're absolutely 100% correct there. So moving on, I wanted to talk to you about something that I saw on the NSSF website. And that is your fixnics program. Fixnics, something that, correct me if I'm wrong, was signed into law under the Trump administration. Maybe you can tell the listeners, again, we got 8 million new gun owners. Some of them might not even know what NICS means. Maybe you can explain what NICS is and what the fixnics program was.
Yeah, so actually we started the program back in 2013, but to kind of give some of your new gun owners, your new listeners, understanding of what NICS is. When you go buy a gun, every time you buy a firearm at retail, you're required to undergo a federal background check. So you fill out that form 4473, the retailer verifies your identification, and then they take all your information and they run it through the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check System. And that lets them know whether you are a prohibited individual or not. They'll come back with one of three responses. It'll either say proceed, delay, or deny. And delay may come up if some of the people don't want to put their social security number on that form, and you happen to be a John Smith born in New York City. They may have 15 other John Smiths born in New York City on the same day, and maybe 5 of those might have some criminal history. And they can't verify who's who just yet, so that may put you into delay status. Me personally, I've never had to wait more than 60 seconds for my proceed to come back.
That's because you don't live in Illinois, but that's a
I don't live in a point of contact state. Yeah, don't live in a point of contact state, and that's a little bit more into the weeds for some of the folks as they start to get into this. But so the NICS background check system, what we found after 2013, so of course it was after the tragedy of Newtown in December of 2012, and that's where our headquarters is. The tragedy of Newtown happened in our town. That's where our folks live and work. It was their community. They knew some of these children. They knew the families that suffered through the tragedy that happened there. But what we found is that there were states that weren't submitting all their disqualifying adjudicated mental health records to the FBI. So I want to be clear on what we're talking about. Adjudicated mental health records. That's when you stand before a judge and that judge tells you, you cannot be trusted with a firearm. You cannot be trusted on your own. We're not giving you a decision anymore. We are going to tell you as the state authority or as a federal authority, you have to go seek mental health treatment. When that happens, that individual becomes a prohibited individual. That means that person can't own a gun anymore. They cannot be trusted with a firearm. So that's put into the same kind of category as people who've been convicted of felony offenses. Can't be trusted with a firearm. Anyone under the age of 18 cannot buy a firearm because they're prohibited individuals. They haven't reached that age of consent of 18 to be able to buy their own gun. So prohibited individual to purchase a firearm. So those adjudicated mental health records weren't being sent in by every state to the FBI. And we noticed that there were significant gaps in that. So we started working on changing the laws in the states. And to date, we've had 16 states change their laws to make sure that they're sending these adjudicated mental health records to the FBI. A 266% increase. There were about 1.7 million of these records in the FBI when we started this campaign, and there are over 6 million of these in the system now. 3 states are still kind of standing out that they don't want to participate in this: Montana, Wyoming, and New Hampshire. Those states don't want to do this, and we're still continuing to work on this. But you're right. In 2017, they had the Fix NICS Act, because what we found after the tragedy, his shootings in Sutherland Springs, Texas, that individual there on several instances should have been listed as a prohibited individual. And I'll go through those. He was dishonorably discharged from the Air Force. That should have made him a prohibited individual right there. He had been convicted of a domestic violence incident. So the Lautenberg Act should have kicked in. If you are convicted of a domestic violence incident, then that means you can no longer be trusted with a firearm. He was also involuntarily committed to a mental health facility. Again, should have made him a prohibited individual. And so he had been prohibited on 3 different occasions, but the Air Force never submitted those records to the FBI's background check system. And that was a DOD federal issue because that fell under their purview and not necessarily under a state. This individual in the Sutherland Springs shootings was able to go out and buy 5 different firearms on 5 different occasions. Each time they ran his information, that retailer at point of sale was checking to make sure that this person was a trusted individual. And each time the FBI system came back and said, proceed. There's nothing telling us that he is someone who cannot be trusted with a firearm. So obviously the system wasn't working because we know from at least 3 different occasions, he should have never had his hands on a gun. And unfortunately, he was able to buy the gun 5 different times. So that's what we're talking about when we did this. So that law was changed in Congress. And actually something I think people need to understand is it wasn't just changed by people who were anti-gun or people who were pro-gun. We had 78 co-sponsors on the Senate bill. That was led by John Cornyn out of Texas, probably your most pro-Second Amendment senator that's out there. And it was also co-sponsored by probably your most anti-gun Second Amendment, anti-Second Amendment senators out there, Chris Murphy out of Connecticut. So when we start talking about trying to find common ground, things that we can work on, this really kind of is an example of that. We were able to say, listen, we want to make sure as an industry that the only people who are buying guns are those people who can be trusted with guns. And again, we're talking adjudicated mental health records, a judge. We're not talking about someone just saying, hey, you went to go see a psychologist to talk about some family issues. That's not adjudicated. That's not disqualifying. Only those when a judge says you are mentally defective, you have to go seek help. We're not giving you a choice anymore. That's when you become a prohibited individual. That law in 2017 changed that. And we're continuing to try and make sure that states are submitting all those disqualifying records to the system to make sure the background check system works the way it was intended to work in the first place.
Nobody wants dangerous people to have access to weapons of any kind. I mean, that's
correct.
The bottom line. However, what would you say to someone such as myself who would say that the only way to fix the NICS is to get rid of it completely and 100%?
I would disagree with you. That's the way we want it. And actually, as the industry, we were, we were the progenitors. We were the ones who were pushing Congress to have the background check system at the point of sale of an instant background check system. Because prior to 1999, your background check system was the retailer mailing all that information into the FBI and waiting to get the proceed information to come back, or phone calling it in to see if we could get it back. But the point of contact or the point of sale background check system, the instant system, and now that we're pushing everything to e-forms to make it even more fluid, to make it easier to get these things done, is making sure that, one, we're going to be able to protect that retailer. That retailer is not going to come back and someone is going to sue that retailer saying you sold a gun to somebody who was criminally insane. We're also going to protect the manufacturer so someone doesn't come back and try to sue them, because we know we have the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. But that doesn't stop the lawyers from trying, and it's still going to suck up legal fees on all these people. When you start talking about the retailers, again, predominantly most of your gun retailers are still mom and pop shops. They're not the big box retailers. So they don't have the deep pockets to always be fighting these activist lawyers who just want to put them out of business. And that's what the criminal background check system helps to do, is to protect those industries, to protect those businesses when it comes to say, listen, we followed all the guidelines. We did this. We did our part to make sure that someone who should never have their hand on a gun doesn't get that. And as far as the industry, we think that's the responsible step to make sure that we're doing our part, that the people who cannot be trusted with a gun don't get their gun.
So, I mean, obviously, yeah, that all makes sense, that if there must be a background check, which I don't think there should be at all, period. It should be that instantaneous. If there must be a background check, it should be instant. As we know, sometimes there are delays, but from my point of view, as a gun rights activist myself, I believe that every single gun law, including background checks, are repugnant to the Second Amendment. I believe that everybody has the right not to own arms per se, because the right to keep and bear arms is the right to be free of tyranny, oppression, and self-defense. And everyone has that right. And the line, the fine razor line that I walk is it a right or is it a privilege? Because it can't be both. And if it's a right, then I believe it cannot be restricted in any way whatsoever. Because once you concede even one restriction, now it's a privilege. And you've just kicked in the door and you've just opened it up to additional restrictions and to violations. As you know, that instant check system is not so instant when you have a record-breaking number of gun owners buying new guns. And now people are, as you said, purchasing guns for self-defense and for personal protection in vast quantities, and they're delayed and they can't get a hold of that firearm. And, you know, it's just one layer of regulation and regulation and restriction to the point where, I mean, in Illinois, it's ridiculous. Just to give you an idea, and obviously Illinois is not just federal, right? Because we're dealing with, as you said, you know, Illinois has its own set of laws. I think you called it what, point of contact state. Mm-hmm. But we've got our firearm owner identification card. The state says they'll have it to you. Oh yeah, we'll have it to you in 30 days, no problem. I know people waiting 10 months. Okay. Then yeah, but you know, it's reasonable restriction just to make sure that people who shouldn't have guns aren't having guns, but then the people who aren't breaking any laws can't get a hold of that gun as well. And then once they get that firearm owner identification card, then they go to the gun store and they want to take possession of that gun. And the state says, no, you got to wait 3 days. We want to cool down, you know, in case you're hot-headed, we want to make sure you don't have access to a firearm. Oh, that's a reasonable restriction. Yeah, but if I, as a existing gun owner, if I already have a gun, why would I go buy another gun to kill someone with when I already have guns? The average gun owner owns 8 guns, so it doesn't make any sense. But 72 hours turns into sometimes 10 days. So here we are, some people waiting almost a year from the day they decide they want to purchase a gun until they actually have that firearm in their hand. I mean, you know, we, as you said, let's find common ground, horse manure. The time for finding common ground, I think, is long since done. We've given an inch here and we've given an inch there, and we're finding common ground, and we're compromising. But every time we compromise on our rights, we are literally losing. We're not losing as much. Oh, the anti-gunners swing for a grand slam. We give them a single, but they're on base. We gave them a base hit. That is a net loss of our rights. And I think every single gun law, every single one is, as I said, repugnant to the Second Amendment. And that would include, you know, the background check system. As I started my rant saying, nobody wants dangerous people to have access to weapons of any kind. And I'm not saying firearms, I'm saying weapons. But there has to be a way that can be accomplished without the millions of non-violent gun owners being swept away with all the delays and all the other restrictions that have been later on top.
Thomas, I certainly don't dismiss your arguments. I think you have some very strong concerns on this, and I understand those concerns, and I share some of those concerns. And we at the firearm industry, the NSSF, we believe that your rights delayed are your rights denied. And we're not supportive of things like a firearm owner identification card. And we've seen what a mess that's turned into in Illinois, where people are waiting beyond 10 months. And we're supportive of what the ISRA is trying to do, bringing the lawsuits against the state and the state police because of the delays that have been put in, where COVID has been the convenient excuse to not allow people to exercise their rights. We're also very aware that the system is swamped, and that's why the industry has actually been the voice of reason when it comes to the budgeting in the federal government, saying that the FBI needs to be plussed up with money specific to make sure that they're able to push through all these background checks in the NICS system. Not just money for the FBI, money for FBI NICS, and also money for the FBI's NFA branch to make sure that you're not waiting 9, 10, sometimes 12 months for your Form 4 to come back for your suppressors. Those things are ridiculous, and we know that that's a push. We're also pushing the FBI to push through Form 4s to e-forms to make sure that we can get rid of this paper trail and do things much easier when we're doing an e-form. It can go through a whole lot quicker. So we're trying to push those. We think that also that a lot of people this year, when they were buying guns for the very first time, woke up to how ridiculous some of these gun control laws that have been layered on by the states. You know, we saw what happened. We saw that there were governors in Pennsylvania, in Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, who used the COVID crisis to be able to shut down gun retailers and try to make sure that people couldn't buy guns when they felt they needed to be able to protect themselves at their most vulnerable time. Fortunately for Illinois, your governor was actually one of the first people to come out and say, we're not going to shut down gun retailers. He recognized that that wasn't the fight that he wanted.
I have to
But
tell
these
you,
other governors did, and they didn't relent until either the judge told them they had to, or they knew that they were going to be fighting a losing fight and didn't want
you
to
don't
go any
understand
further.
how surprised myself and many of I'm a firearm instructor, so my colleagues, my partner ranges that I work with, you don't even it was a foregone conclusion in our mind that this was going to be a year-long battle to get the gun stores to open back up. And when we were reading through the documentation of that first executive order, it was like collectively a thunk as our jaws hit the floor across the state. So
And I
yeah,
think
that was surprising.
And I think that's something, I'm not going to sit here and try and pat ourselves in the back, but I'm going to pat ourselves in the back here for just a second. That was the work that the NSSF was doing. Our guy that actually lives in Illinois, he was working with all the governors in the north central states, and we have guys that are regionally living around the country, and they all have their own regions to cover. At the federal level, we worked with the Department of Homeland Security to get firearm industries, the manufacturers, the distributors, and the retailers listed as essential services so that you can exercise your Second Amendment right. That doesn't stop because of a pandemic. There's no pandemic clause on the Second Amendment. So we made sure that they understood that. And as well as that was the federal government. And of course, that was only guidance. It wasn't law. So we also had to impress upon the governors the need to not intrude upon your rights. And that had to be a 50 state by state battle. We had to go into each of those governors' offices to make sure they understood it. Some governors intuitively understand it. We didn't have this kind of issue in South Dakota. South Dakota's governor understands it. Florida's governor understands it. But, trying to get, the Pennsylvania governor to understand it was, only convinced him when he was faced with having to go into a courtroom and defend his unconstitutional position. But I think, some of the work that our guy was able to do there in Illinois and be able to convince Governor Pritzker that this is the right way to go, he saw that right away. And I think, credit to the governor on this. And we disagree with the governor on a whole lot of things, but credit to the governor that he recognized that this wasn't a fight that he wanted to have.
I mean, it was a losing battle, but obviously it would take months to get the court decision to go through. So, hey, some people are going to get mad at me, but credit to him as well for picking and choosing his battles and not making that one. Let's pivot a little bit. I want to talk about your Project Child Safe program, which, to be 100% honest with you, is what first introduced me to the NSSF many years ago. When I first heard about this program, started looking into it, and then who's putting on this program? Who's the NSSF? What's this? And tell me about Project Child Safe. What is it?
Yeah, so Project Child Safe has actually been going on for 20 years. It started actually as a program that we partnered with originally then Governor Bush down in Texas, and that's what started the whole program. We encourage everybody who's not using a firearm, when that gun's not in use, it's not on your hip, or you're not on the range with it, it should be locked up in your home. We encourage everyone to understand what safe storage is and to practice safe storage in the home. And that's to protect yourself, your family, and to make sure that you're not going to be vulnerable to any kind of theft. The most basic form of security starts with that free gun lock, that free locking device that comes with every gun sold at retail. Now, I know most of us probably take that gun lock, put it in a drawer, and maybe never use it again. Maybe we only pull it out if we have to fly with that gun and make sure things are double locked when we're flying or traveling. And we may have other locking devices that we're going to use. Some people want to use, RFID safes so they can have quick access. Some people want to use digital combination safes. I have upright safes that I store my long guns and smaller safes that I store my handguns. Each thing is going to work different for each person depending upon their lifestyle. And those lifestyle decisions will change over time. As my kids grew up, my storage needs, and as I got more guns, those storage needs changed over time. And then as my kids got older, I wanted to maybe make sure that my kids could access that gun if they needed to in an emergency. So those storage needs changed again as they started to become young adults. And then now that I'm getting to the point where I've got a small grandchild running around, I've got to also assess my storage needs again. So I want to make sure that I'm going to go through and store those. And that's all part of the Operation Project Child Safe program that we have. But really what this comes down to is a partnership that we have with law enforcement, with 15,000 law enforcement agencies across the country in all 50 states and the 5 U.S. territories. And so far, over the past 20 years, we've distributed 40 million of these locking devices. It includes a little firearm safety kit, some information on make sure how they use it. But again, when you insert this locking device through that gun, it's going to render that firearm inoperable. And that's just to make sure that that gun can't ever be used in a manner it's not supposed to be used. So we're going to make sure that that gun is not going to be able to be picked up and used by a child, picked up by someone who may be suffering through a mental health crisis and don't want them to have access to that gun. Or again, somebody who may be a prohibited individual. There may be someone that you're friends or family with who may have a prohibiting factor and they're not able to own a firearm. So this is just one way to make sure that that firearm is not going to be able to be put into use. Again, most basic level of security to make sure that that firearm is not being able to use. We encourage everybody to be able to do this. We partner with law enforcement to do this. So this isn't just a gun industry thing, but we're also making sure, because the police have the contact with that community every day, day in and day out. Some of these people may not have access to come down to a gun store or to a gun range and pick up a lock. But we want to make sure as the police are going around, I know in my community, the local police have these in their trunk. And as they're driving around and they're stopping to talk to people, if the conversation comes up about gun ownership, they're going to reach in, they're going to grab a couple locks and hand them out and say, hey, just make sure you have these around with you. Please use them. Make sure that the guns are going to be inoperable and safe when they're stored in the home.
So I agree with you. I am an advocate for keeping firearms locked up when not in use. I define as not in use very similar to what you said. If the firearm is on my hip, it's in use. If I'm at the range with the firearm, it's in use. If it's my bedside gun, so to speak, whether that be in a safe or in a nightstand or right on in a drawer on the top of the nightstand, obviously that's going to vary from person to person. That firearm is in use. Everybody has a different criteria. You got grandkids, I've got children. Some people don't entertain, some people have house guests. But I get a lot of pushback from gun owners, a locked up gun is a useless gun. Yes, if it's for defensive purposes, I absolutely agree. That's why I said, if it's your nightstand gun or if it's your, concealed carry, it's on your hip, that firearm is in use. It should be loaded and ready to go, period. But at the same point in time, if it's your hunting gun and you only hunt, a weekend out of the year with that particular rifle, it makes sense. A safety point of view, of course, right? You don't want someone, a child, a house guest, your crazy uncle getting a hold of the gun. That makes sense. But strictly from a point of view of theft, right? I wouldn't leave a $500 or $1,000 stack of cash laying on my table. I'm probably not going to leave my rifle, my $1,000 rifle hanging on a rack on the wall for very much that reason as well. I don't want to really advertise what I have. I think that it makes a lot of sense to keep, if it's not in use, it should be locked up. It's a valuable item and it can be used negligently by someone who is untrained or has nefarious ideas. So it just makes sense in my opinion. But I'm sure you come across the people, oh, you're a FUD and this, that, and the other. What do you have to say about that? I know you hinted on it just a little bit, but what specifically? I find it difficult to. It's like people are sometimes just being purposely obtuse on the subject, and I sometimes, a lot of people are like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, if it's in use, keep it accessible. But if it's not in use, I've got for my training classes probably 7 9mm pistols of similar size and shape. I couldn't possibly carry all of them, even if I wanted to. So guess what? They're locked up in a safe because guess what? I don't want them stolen.
Exactly. And that's really what it comes down to. I think people start to, retreat to their corners when they start to hear about, safe storage in the home. And this is a voluntary action that we're asking people to take. It's a responsible
And that's a key
action.
point, voluntary. You nor me, we're not saying to the government, please make this a law or a rule. And some governments are, we see those bills introduced all the time. But at the same point in time, that is a good point. That's not what neither you nor I are saying. We're just saying it should be voluntary and it should be a decision that the individual makes based upon, if you never have anyone come over to your house, no nieces, nephews, no service repairmen, nothing like that, well, then your needs are a little bit different than you who have grandkids.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, each person's storage needs are going to become different. When I was a single guy and a gun owner, my storage needs were very simple. It was me. I'd want to make sure that my long guns were locked up, and same as you. If I was home, I wanted to make sure that my handgun was accessible for me to be able to, defend myself should I need to. And again, as I got older and I started to get more guns, and my lifestyle changed when I was married and started to have kids, and when those kids are growing up, Kids are curious. They're going to get in. If you think that you're going to be able to put your gun into the back closet and they're never going to get it, you're woefully mistaken. They're going to find it and they're going to get into it.
Your
So
kids know everything in your house. They know things that you forgot about where you put. If you ever lost something, ask your kids. They know where it's at.
I think any parent understands that you have no secrets as a parent. And if you want to, just go to the next parent-teacher conference you're able to and see what kind of stories your kids are telling your teachers about what's going on in the home. Sure. We all get it. So, I mean, it's just a matter, again, and you're right. There are states that are trying to put down laws, and some of them successfully pass these laws. We believe that these laws of mandatory home storage are blatantly unconstitutional under the findings of the Heller decision. Heller decision said that the government cannot tell you that you have to have an inoperable and inaccessible firearm in the home. That's exactly, contrary to what the Second Amendment says. And the Heller decision struck that down. Doesn't mean that they're not trying for this. It's unenforceable law. They're not coming into your house to inspect it. But they're putting these laws down to scare people and to kowtow them into a gun control mindset. We see this even being introduced in Congress. Senator Blumenthal and Senator Murphy, whom I spoke about a little bit ago, they introduced what they called Ethan's Law, which was passed and is law in Connecticut, and they want to bring that to the rest of the country, that they want to make sure that all the guns in your home are locked up and inaccessible to you when you need it the most. And we're not in favor of that. If you want to make sure that you have a handgun accessible to you to be able to protect yourself and your family, then sure, do that. We want to make sure that you have it. For me personally, then maybe that best place for that gun is going to be on my hip instead of sitting up on the counter. Or maybe it's going to be, having an RFID safe if that's what you want, or a digital combination safe that I can get at really quickly. So each storage need is going to be different for each person. Listen, when we walk out, those of us who carry everyday concealed, we have our routine of how we get ourselves together each day to go out the door to make sure that we have our gun, have our spare magazine, maybe have a flashlight, have a pocket knife, have my wallet, make sure that my wallet has my concealed carry permit in there, the whole 9 yards. Same thing with home storage. If you're going to have that gun in the home, make sure you have your routine so you know that it's locked up, safe, and inaccessible to those who should just never have it. That's just loving your family. That's simple as that. And again, voluntary.
Yeah, voluntary is key. Just so everyone listening understands, voluntary. Let me tell you why I hate you, Mark. Where to shoot, the website Where to Shoot. I've had in my life a number of brilliant ideas that I've never acted on, and Where to Shoot is one of those ideas. And of course, I'm joking when I say why I hate you, because you guys, it's an excellent resource. The Where to Shoot website, was it wheretoshoot.org or wheretoshoot.com?
Wheretoshoot.org.
So basically, you enter in your address and you say, I'm looking for a range within 50 miles, 100 miles. And I'm looking for rifle, I'm looking for indoor, I'm looking for archery, whatever it may be. I'm looking for a range that sells guns, so I can maybe see what's available. And you enter in your criteria, and it's going to spit out, all the ranges that meet that criteria. And such a brilliant idea. I'm glad I had it. I'm sad I didn't act on it, but because I've referred, I couldn't tell you how many thousands of people to that website. Throughout my last 7 years as a firearm instructor. I'm active in social media. Hey, I'm looking for what's the best rifle range within this area. Go here, and it's such a great idea. And you also rate the ranges, right? You give them 4 or 5 star rating.
Yeah, so through our range services program, our guy who runs that program, Zach, he has a criteria. I don't know exactly what goes into it. This is his wheelhouse. But he will make sure that
tell Zach I hate him too.
Yeah, so they will. They have a criteria checklist to make sure they can stack ranges up as 3, 4, and 5 star ranges, so that people have a better idea of what's available to them when they go out there. The whole idea of creating the wheretoshoot.org and even wheretohunt.org websites was because we understand that there are barriers to entry to the recreational shooting sports. We get that. Listen, one, it's not a cheap sport to get into. You have to make a pretty significant investment of your hard-earned dollars to buy a firearm. And then, of course, when you live in a state like you do, you have to go through all the hoops and the hurdles that it takes to even get a firearm. First, you have to get approved to get your firearm owner's identification card. Once you get that, then you can go buy your handgun, go through the same background check all over. And then you got to go through all the registration process, the whole nine. We know it's not easy. So we want to reduce those barriers of entry. And one of those barriers of entry that we found is people said, yeah, we're really interested in shooting. We just don't know where to go. And we found that if people couldn't get to a range within about a half hour, maybe 40 minutes of where they live, they weren't going to do it. So we wanted to make sure that people had a resource to be able to look to see where's the nearest range that I can go do this type of shooting that I want to do. Now, I want to make sure people understand wheretoshoot.org is not an exhaustive list of gun ranges. It is, those gun ranges who ask to be listed, we'll list them on there. We'll put them on there. We certainly want as many listed on there as we possibly can, but it doesn't include everybody out there. So if someone looks on there and says, well, why isn't my range listed? Hey, submit your information. We'd love to have you. And I don't think we particularly care if you're a member or not. We just want to make sure people have ability to go out and shoot somewhere, because we know if they get out there and shoot, I'm sure you've seen it 1,000 times. I've never seen anyone walk away from the firing line without a smile on their face.
I call it the range effect. I've brought people who are mildly anti-gun. Generally speaking, they're anti-gun because either they believe the media or they've had bad experiences with firearms. And if you can take someone who just has an open mind, right? You can be as anti-gun as you want, but just come with me. I'll buy your ammo. I'll pay you your range fee. And just have an open mind. And I start them out with a 22 because who doesn't like shooting a 22? And they realize, hey, this thing's not going to blow up in my hand. They've got that appreciation of hitting the target, of accomplishing a goal. And then you can move them up to maybe a 380 or a 9mm and like you said, they leave the range with a smile 100% of the time. And now you can kind of see that wasn't so bad. And, you were afraid. There's not really a lot to be afraid of, right? Because if you're safe and you follow the safety rules, nothing can go wrong. And man, you got those wheels turning. And now you've got this person who, again, had an open mind. And now they're leaning a little more towards our side, right? They're probably not as, some people call me an extremist from time to time. My previous rant is a reason why I get that label and I wear it with honor. But at least they're leaning in that direction to this isn't as bad as what they said or, whatever that situation is. So yeah, taking people to the range and even someone who's just curious, might be able to go rent a gun, even if you go by yourself or go to the range and ask them to have, hey, can your instructor work with me for a half hour? I haven't shot a gun before. I mean, that's if you're afraid of the gun, you don't really know why you're afraid of the gun, because you've had a lifelong of programming to tell you that these things are dangerous and evil and this, that, and the other, but you're kind of curious about it. Go to the range, work with an instructor, and just get that actual experience. So then you can make an informed decision based upon facts like, hey, this is what it is. Now, if you still think it's dangerous, if you still think, like that one reporter says he got PTSD from it, I mean, hey, that's how you feel. I can't control how you feel, but at least make the decisions from a point of factual information and not from just pure feelings.
Yeah, Thomas, you're right. And I apologize, I'm coughing in your ear. This is why the NSSF started our program of the National Shooting Sports Month. Every August, we encourage all the rangers to get people out to their ranges by, specials. We help them with special targets, special programs, especially our First Shots program. Try to get people out to the range because, one, we understand there are a lot of people out there with a lot of questions. They just don't know what they don't know, and sometimes they're afraid to ask. But two, also, we understand there are a lot of people who maybe, like you were talking about, maybe the 8.5 million people who bought a gun this year and think that they're okay by just putting that gun in the sock drawer and they don't have to worry about it anymore.
Having a baseball bat doesn't make you Babe Ruth. Having a basketball doesn't make you Michael Jordan. You need training and practice. And lots
exactly. So we want to encourage people to get out. And that's why every August we host the National Shooting Sports Month to try and encourage people to get back out, to reactivate maybe some of those lapsed recreational shooters and get back into the sport that you loved at one point. We understand, hey, lifestyles change. Work takes up way too much of my time. I don't get out to hunt and shoot near as much as I want to. But this kind of gives us a point on the calendar where we're going to say, okay, I'm going to rededicate a little bit of my time back to something I love to do. But also on top of that, we have our +1 program, and that's where we challenge every recreational shooter and every hunter out there to grow one more person like you. So if we just look at the numbers, and I honestly think that they're a little low. Pew Research Center does a survey every year of gun owners, and they estimate that roughly a little over 100 million people have a gun in the home. Again, I think that number is probably a little low, and I think it's because if you're going to call me on my phone and start asking me about my guns, I'm probably going to hang up on you. And I think most other gun owners are the same way. We self-select out of these surveys. Exactly. So So what we challenge people that if you're going to be, if you're going to want to see this sport of ours that we love and this lifestyle that we love and our rights that we love continue to be passed on to the next generation, then we have to exercise that. And we have to make sure that we're growing that next generation. We're growing it the right way, not the way that, Stumpy down in the corner is going to show up, but we want to make sure that my son and my daughter are going to learn the right way to be able to shoot a gun, handle a gun, store a gun safely. So take time and take somebody out who's never shot before. Invite them to come with you. I think people would be just amazed at how open some people are if they just got the invite to come shoot with them.
I think,
and like you said, I do the same thing. Yeah, do the same thing you did. I mean, hey, listen, I'll buy your first box of rounds. I'll let you shoot my gun. I'll pay you range fee. Just come with me. We kind of joke about it. Go ahead.
I took my wife to the range before I proposed because, I had to see how does she feel about the firearm. She never said anything anti-gun, but, when it came down to it, I'm like, having these serious thoughts in my head about spending the rest of my life with this person. I need to know how she feels about these things. Is it going to be a deal breaker? And I was very, very pleased that she said yes when I asked if she wanted to go. I think a lot of people would be afraid to approach, hey, you're a gun guy, will you take me to the range? I mean, that's just a little bit rude. It has nothing to do with guns. It's just like, hey, you like to drive go-karts. Will you take me to drive go-karts with you? I mean, it's just weird, right? But if they're inviting you, would you like to go drive a go-kart with me? Hell yeah, who doesn't like to drive go-karts? Guns
Sure.
are no different. We've got to kind of take that first step as gun owners and say, hey, you want to go shooting? It's a lot of fun. Come
I think it's important for us as gun owners to understand too that we were all new to the sport at one time too.
Absolutely.
And we didn't know what we didn't know. And some of us may have learned the right way. Some of us may have learned bad habits that we had to relearn over. So let's take it upon ourselves to make sure that those around us who may be interested are going to learn from somebody that, one, they're going to listen to, and two, you're going to teach them the right way to do these things.
Yeah,
and that's going to be that
one-on-one
one-on-one personal contact.
situation.
Yeah.
So let's talk about SHOT Show, because that's obviously one of your guys' biggest programs. Yep, it was canceled, Corona. And, this year was going to be the first year that I actually was going to go. And I've been wanting to go for many, many years. And it's just always something. It's either the money or something. And this year I was dead set on going. And then I found out the dates were on my daughter's 15th birthday. And my wife is Puerto Rican, and in Puerto Rican culture, the 15th birthday, the quinceañera, is like,
Yep.
if I wasn't there, I'd come back to an empty house. So
Exactly.
the fact that it was canceled this year took a huge burden off of my shoulders. But next year I'm going to go 100%. And tell me, what is SHOT Show?
So SHOT Show is our annual trade show. I mean, that's where all the manufacturers are able to kind of roll out all the new models for the year. And that's where everyone kind of gets to see all the new, best and brightest. Think of it as the gun industry's version of the Detroit Auto Show. They want to roll out the best and brightest of what they have. And just like a couple weeks before us, they have the Consumer Electronics Show in the very same space that we're in. And that's where you see all the new, whiz-bang gadgets. Well, our whiz-bang gadgets happen to be made of steel and sometimes some polymer parts, but this is where we get to see what the latest and greatest is going to be. And that's really where your manufacturers are making some of the big deals with your retailers for the year. I mean, this is where some people are going to come out and they're going to make their annual order because they're able to buy things a little bit smaller bulk. It's not a gun show, and I think it's important to understand for people. It's not like going down to the local area gun show where your average person is going to be able to walk in,
because it's not open to the average person.
It's not. You have to be in the industry to be able to be approved, and we have a screening process to do that. And we've actually taken some flack over the years about either being too stringent or being too loose with the rules on who gets in. But we do that because we want to make sure that the people who are working the booths aren't going to be tied down by people who just want to kick the tires all the time. They're there to do business. And we want to make sure that people like you who are coming are able to do business with them. So they're not going to be blocked up by people who just want to play with all the latest gadgets, but they want to be able to talk to people who are ready to do business and be able to start to move some product to the stores.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, every year, hundreds, you've got TV shows doing coverage of the floor. Obviously, they spend most of the time with their sponsors, but that's great to see what they're bringing to market. It's funny how some years there's trends, right? Obviously, every industry has trends, and it's funny. Remember the zombie trend, how goofy that was? But it was like every manufacturer jumped on it. And I remember watching the videos and watching the bloggers, the vloggers, and it was like every gun was green and boxes of green ammunition. And, it was the old joke is what's tactical? Well, paint it black and double the price. The zombie was the same thing. It was throw on some green furniture and double the price. And thank God that didn't last. But then a year later, concealed carry and subcompacts was just booming a market, and it's great to be able to follow those industry trends. And it's curious how every single manufacturer is following the trend, obviously because they want to sell products, but at the same point in time, they're obviously doing the same market research and coming to the same conclusions simultaneously and independently of one another. And that's what I find, just astonishing is the time, the energy, the resources that the manufacturers are putting into research and development and market research. I know Ruger's real big on their market research, and they spend a lot of time bragging about how the president of the company will go to gun stores to talk to consumers and things like that. But that's what you need to do. People want to buy what they want, and if people aren't making what they want, they can't buy it. And the manufacturer's trying to, to be blunt, they're trying to take your money, but they're trying to give you a product in return. So they want to know what you're willing to spend your money on so that they can take your money. I mean, that's what business is about, and God bless capitalism.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, so I think if you look at, some of the innovations that have been brought up to SHOT Show in the past few years, look at Mossberg. Mossberg is a shotgun company. They've been making great shotguns for decades. But a couple of years ago, they introduced their very first handgun. So, I mean, it was, kind of one of those things that kind of shook the whole market a little bit, because here you had a shotgun company that's now introducing not just a compact handgun, but a polymer compact handgun. And by all measures, it was, received very well by the market. But you also look at some of the other things that some of the other companies are doing. Smith & Wesson a couple of years ago introduced the EZ, the EZ380.
I love them.
So it is. It's a great little gun, and it's they're obviously had a great success with the M&P line, but this one they specifically went back and they started asking women, what is it that you like and don't like about guns? And one of these things was very specific to even my own wife. My wife's starting to get a little bit of arthritis in her hand, so
sure.
Working the slide on a subcompact gun is really tough when you have such a stiff spring on there. So the fact that you can move that slide with two fingers, the fact that she could pull down the follower on the magazine,
loading
and not have to jam
with a little thumb pulling on the button. Absolutely,
exactly. So she didn't have to jam her. The first time we rented one, and we had the chance to go shoot one. She said, "What I like about this gun is I can do everything without you." Now, understand, my wife's a former Marine, just like me. She grew up shooting. I mean, she's not, she's not a wilting flower by any means.
So she knows how. She was just not as capable as she was a few years prior.
Exactly. Physical capability was starting to become an issue for her. So this gun answered some of those questions, and it also had some of the safety features. She loves my 1911 because it has the grip safety, and that was something that was incorporated onto this handgun. Well, obviously they had such success with the 380 EZ that they also now offer that now 9mm.
And isn't not just copying that idea? Now they have their own spin-off of the 380. I mean, of the easy idea.
Well, I think a lot of companies are starting to wake up that, it used to be, and you talked about the zombie thing, and this is kind of what made me think about it. It used to be a few years ago that, if you wanted to market stuff to women in the gun world, the idea was to pink it and shrink it. And we all know that was one, it was a little patronizing. And two, it didn't quite answer the mail on it, because it didn't make the gun any more usable to women. So if you look at a different aspect of this is Weatherby designed a few years ago the Camilla Rifle. And this was designed for everything. It's still your Western big game hunting rifle that Weatherby is known for, but they built this rifle around the stature of a woman. Now, obviously, my build is much different than my wife's build. My arms are a little bit longer. My shoulders are broader. The length of pull for me on a gun is going to be different than the length of pull for her.
And that's important for accurate shots at distance, is having a comfortable gun that fits who you are individually as a person.
Exactly. And that's what Weatherby did, is they built this rifle, not for me. They built this rifle for someone like my wife. So I think you're starting to see is that the gun industry is waking up to the fact that, they have to recognize where the emerging trends are. And we talked about at the beginning of this, 8.5 million people bought a gun for the very first time. But also 8.5 million people who bought guns last year were women. That's a significant size of the market. And if you're not answering the needs of those people, then you're missing out on a big chunk of your market. And those who are going to answer those needs are going to benefit from that. So I think that's really neat to be able to walk around the SHOT Show on the floor and to see who's answering the needs of the market as that market tends to shift. And it's always going to shift.
Sure.
It's always going to move a little bit. So those companies who are able to anticipate what those needs are and meet those needs at that point of need are the ones who are going to benefit the most. And I think that's probably one of the most fun things about walking around a SHOT Show, to see what those innovations are and to see what's happening. Aside from that, you get to hang out with 50,000 of your closest friends that you never even knew you knew.
Yeah.
So, especially after this year, if you're able to come out to SHOT Show, I recommend comfortable shoes for walking around. Your feet are going to be blistered after a couple of days. Lots of hand sanitizer and hand wipes.
And that was
masks.
true even before Corona, because what was the
SHOT Show crowd,
flu, or what were they calling it? That everyone
Yeah.
seems to get at SHOT Show.
Yeah.
They come away with some respiratory illness for a few days.
Yep, I've been a victim of it for
And
several SHOT
let's be
shows.
fair, that's not just at SHOT Show. That's at every trade show of that size.
Any kind of big convention where you're bringing people from all over
Absolutely.
the country that are bringing all their own versions of the common cold and flu with them. So, it is a really neat event for a lot of people. It's a bit of a homecoming because you get to see people in the industry you haven't had a chance to see face to face. And now it'll be 2 years by the time we're able to get back around. But SHOT Show is always the same time, third week of January every year, Tuesday through Friday. And really, if you come to SHOT Show, you need to come with a game plan. I think right now with the old floor plan, it was still if you tried to see every booth, you would only be able to spend about, I think it was 10 to 11 seconds at each booth to be able to see it.
And it's in multiple, at least like you said, old floor plan. I don't know what the new one will be. All that information is on your website.
Yeah.
So if you are planning on coming, get that floor plan, make your game plan, which is what I was doing. But it's multiple buildings. It's not just one big, it's multiple, spread across multiple buildings. You couldn't possibly fit all those people in one building. They don't make buildings that size.
And that's what it is. That's a new floor plan. So we're expanded over to the Caesars to be able to do that. And it's going to nearly double the size of the available square footage that we had. So it's really going to put a lot more availability out there. It'll help spread people out a little bit. We'll still anticipate, about 50,000 or so we're going to attend. So it'll be a little less crowded. And some of the big guys have already said that, they want to go over to the new space. So it's not like, it's just going to be, hey, it's just going to be small guys over there. You don't need to worry about them, or the OEM guys. It's going to be a mix of everybody all over the place. So it's a little more breathing room. People can spread out. You're not worried about getting bumping into everybody so much all the time, but it's definitely something you need to have a game plan. That's why we created the app for SHOT Show, that you can do literally your entire day plan on your phone. You just pull it up and you can plan your entire visit. And even now, for those who weren't able to get to SHOT Show because we had to cancel, we've actually left all those apps and those media rooms open, so you can still contact the manufacturers now to be able to hear about all the great product that they brought this year, but unfortunately we weren't able to get out to Vegas to see it. So it's available. We want to make sure that we're doing the best we can for our manufacturers, distributors, and retailers, and to make sure that they can see all the new stuff. So, but it really is. It's a neat thing. And after I go out there usually Sunday, to get ready. Monday's going to be a busy day. I'm usually out at range day on Monday, and then Tuesday through Friday, I'm working it up in the media room, trying to help out and down on the floor. And by the time Friday night comes, we shut down the show. I'm wore out.
Assuming it's a marathon for you. Just go for 4 days.
Constant. And I'll tell you, a lot of people are able to get out and enjoy some of the gambling and some of the other things in Vegas. I see the sunlight maybe twice the whole time. I almost never leave the building because I'm working from 7 o'clock in the morning to probably about 11 o'clock at night. And that's how it is for a lot of people. It's not just, time on the floor. It's also, you're going to meet somebody for dinner and drinks, and you're talking business the whole time. Right. I mean, it's constant for everybody, but it really is a tremendous time. It's sad that we weren't able to do it this year. I think we're all looking forward to it next year, especially with the new floor plan and the fact that, we want to make sure that this show is something that's going to be beneficial for our members, to be able to, showcase their newest and their latest, and for people to be able to do good business deals.
Mark, you've been an excellent guest. This is probably one of the longest podcasts I've done, and I still have a million questions. I'd love it if, as we get closer to SHOT Show, you can come back and we can dedicate, maybe a whole podcast just to that, to kind of prep people who might be going, such as myself. I'm being a little selfish for the first time, and get a little more exposure on that. But I'm gonna want to wrap this up. Is there anything you want to leave me with? Anything you want my listeners to know about you, to know about the NSSF? The floor is yours. If someone wants to, contact the NSSF or contact you, you've got time. Tell me, the floor is yours. Tell me what you want to say.
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing is some of those safety programs. We talked about fixnics. We talked about Project Child Safe, but we've also got a couple other programs, our suicide prevention measures that we're working with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and the Department of Veterans Affairs to try and stop a tragedy before it occurs. We've got programs for retailers to help, harden your store to deter some of these smash and grab thefts that we see, all across the nation.
Very important.
Our Operation Secure Store. So if your listeners want to go to nssfrealsolutions.org, they can find out more of those programs. And when you start hearing about people wanting to layer on gun laws, this is exactly what I point back to. And I said, listen, we're already doing the things that you want to do. We're doing it through a voluntary basis, and you don't need to layer on more laws. We're doing this as an industry because it's the right thing to do. And the last thing, I think the problem we talked about, Project Child Safe and Plus One. If you have a gun in the home, you're not using it, make sure that it's locked up. We encourage everybody to do that, to consider what's the best way for you. And lastly, make sure you've got 8.5 million people out there who are new-time gun owners, first-time gun owners. They don't know what they don't know, and there's a lot more people behind them. We had 2 million background checks for the sale of a gun in January. February is still looking very strong. My son works at a big box retailer in the town I live in. Excuse me. He said last weekend, within 30 minutes of the store opening up, they had a line from the back gun counter all the way out through the front door. So it's not slowing down. We're going to be with this for a while. So get these new gun owners out to the range, teach them the right way, and invite somebody else new to enjoy the sport that we love.
Thank you so much for being on today's episode. I truly appreciate your time. Even though we had that little disagreement, we can sort that out later. Maybe we'll just duke it out in the alley or something like that. Obviously, I'm joking, but that's going to wrap it up for today's podcast. Again, thank you, Mark, and thank you, everybody, for listening. Stay tuned to future podcasts. We're going to have more great guests. We're kicking it into high gear in 2021. Don't forget to check out the training calendar at alphaconcepts.com, not only for hands-on training classes, concealed carry, defensive pistol, but those free webinars as well. And if you have an idea for a podcast or you'd like to be a guest on a future podcast, definitely hit me up, alphaconcepts.com/podcast. And remember, concepts is spelled with a K. Thank you, everybody. Be armed, be trained, and be alpha.